Throughout his journeys in Lisa the Painful, Brad comes across many of its unique denizens. For most of these people, their personal stories aren't really brought forward or are pushed to the background while the story focuses more on Brad's struggles in Olathe. However, just because these stories aren't in the forefront of the games doesn't mean they aren't compelling on their own. Let's dive into some of the personal stories of a few of those that call Olathe home. At the edge of the swamps of Muddy Waters, inside a ramshackle village and makeshift bar, sat a man named Wyatt. With his strange appearance, a mountainous body that climbed up to a head that was hidden within a diving helmet, and his insistence to linger in the bar for days and days, he was looked at as unsettling by some of the men in the village. In truth, Bo was hanging around this bar because recently his brother Henry had disappeared, and this bar was a favorite hangout spot of the two. They used to come here and listen to music for hours and hours. Bo was trying to comfort his sorrow by spending time in a location he associated with his brother. One day, while sitting alone, he heard a familiar tune emanate from the record player by the bar. As he perked his ears up, he recognized it as music that came from his brother's record. He noticed a bearded man that put the record in the player and stopped him. Figuring he got the record from his brother, he begged the man to take him to where he found him. The man agreed and led Bo deep into a cave with strange, fleshy forms stretching along the walls and ceiling. As they reached the back of the cavern, they came to a hanging head, whose long neck was the source of the fleshy forms as it twisted throughout the rocks. As Bo gazed upon the head, he was dismayed to find that it was his brother's. The man explained that in the very next room, he found a body with an elongated neck clutching the record he found. After picking up the record and exiting the room, he was attacked by this monster, whom he killed to defend himself. Bo thanked the man for bringing him here, then grieved the death of his brother, who fell to the vices of joy addiction, yet could take comfort in that even in his mutated form, he held on to the one thing that reminded him of his brother. While traveling across some cliff tops, Brad came across a man wearing an interesting outfit, staring at something off in the distance. As Brad talked to him, the man immediately turned around with wide eyes and loudly apologized. But his demeanor changed when he saw Brad standing there. He explained that he was told by his pal Jim that he needed to stand here and stare at the sun for a while, and that he would get a whooping if Jim found out he stopped. He told Brad it was nice to meet him, but that he needed to get back to work. So he turned and began to stare directly into the sun again. The Jim that this man is referring to is a sadist named Slave Lord Jim that made his residence at a location named Dismal Island, a place that Brad could visit after finding a sea map detailing its location and asking Shardy to take him there. As he arrived, the only thing he saw was a long black rope cascading from the cliff top. He climbed it, and at the top, found it was actually an extremely long mustache of a man that was lying still, unmoving, seemingly catatonic. He left the man and entered a nearby hut, where inside Brad found the slave lord himself. He was standing in the corner, moaning about the disappearance of his sweet boy, Jonathan. He soon noticed Brad, and commented on numerous features of his appearance before stating that he'd be perfect. He asked Brad if he thought so too, to which Brad hesitantly agreed. Jim then pulled Brad outside, parked him at the edge of the cliff, and ordered him to jump. Brad complied, taking severe damage. He climbed up to Slave Lord Jim again, who slid him into a nice dress and ordered him to tell Conrad his new name, Sexy Boy. Sexy Boy did what he was told, then returned to Jim, who offered a drink to this classy girl, a drink of spray paint and glue. Sexy Boy downed the drink, then started to feel weird. He exited the hut to see the sky full of gliding red tendrils. He sprinted down the path in front of him, finding an enormous, disfigured head. It opened its maw, and Sexy Boy heard it offer support to Buddy, Brad's daughter. He made his way back to the doorway he emerged from, and was soon returned to the familiar hut with Jim scowling at him. He told Sexy Boy that it wasn't working, that the joy he got from his humiliation and pain just wasn't the same. All because he wasn't his sweet boy, Jonathan. Since Sexy Boy's torment wasn't producing the same feelings he got when he tortured Jonathan, Jim started a fight with him in an attempt to kill him. But Sexy Boy turned the tables and instead killed the slave lord. He then changed his name back to Brad and took off the classy dress. When he went to leave, he found Conrad beat up and bloody, and a tall, frazzled man freaking out next to him. As Brad approached, he found it was Slave Lord Jim's sweet boy, Jonathan, who was in the initial stages of joy mutation. Jonathan attacked Brad, just as his master had done, and he met the same fate that Jim had: defeat at the hands of Brad. As a child, Horus Finkle always wanted to be a bulldozer driver, just like his father was before he died. Yet, those around him didn't believe in him. He defied their expectations, though, and went to bulldozer school, passing the tests necessary to graduate. As he stood there, he was proud to hear the teacher announce the final diploma was to go to him, Horus Finkle. Realizing there must have been a mistake, he pointed it out, but the teacher gave him the diploma anyways. Having officially graduated, he set out to begin his illustrious career as a bulldozer driver, and he soon had a chance to prove himself to all his doubters when a refrigerator fell on his wife, threatening to kill her unless he could lift it off of her. He was confident in his ability, having spent many years and all their money to become Horus, the shining bulldozer prince. However, his confidence was all bluster, and he failed to save his wife. At her funeral, his grandfather, who had always doubted him, showed up and admonished his ability as a bulldozer driver. It was damaging for Horus, and he felt lost for many years. After the flash occurred, he found work at a construction site, yet never touched the bulldozer, as the memories were too painful for him. However, one day, a bald man showed up, climbed into a bulldozer, and started killing his co-workers. Horus knew there was only one way to stop this madman, so he climbed into a bulldozer himself and confronted the man, determined to redeem himself. But that was when the memories of his past came back to haunt him. This reflection drained Horus's resolve, and he told the man he didn't want to fight anymore. He was going to press the off pedal and go home. But that off pedal was the accelerator, and he entered a fight with the bald man, where he met his doom at his hands. With his final words, he lamented his latest failure to his lost love, Becky. The only thing that remained of him was the hard hat that inspired Horus to chase after his dream. A dream that came at the expense of someone else's. Soon after Horus received his diploma and left the room, another man entered and announced himself as Horus Finkle. With the teacher wrongly giving his diploma to Horus, Horus was now doomed to live out the rest of his days, never realizing his own dream of being a bulldozer driver. It was the saddest day of his life. Yet, he found some way to live on, and after the flash, found a meaningful purpose. He started an orphanage to care for the kids that were abandoned in the wastelands of Olathe. During a relatively normal day, he found that Tommy was playing with matches and tried to get them away from him when he was startled by a man that was standing behind him. The man told him he was looking for a child, so Morse began to tell him of his orphanage, but then noticed Tommy had lit the match he was playing with moments ago. He asked the stranger to get his bucket of water to put out the fire, but the man grabbed his bucket of gasoline and doused the children with it, causing all of them to erupt in flames. Morris screamed at the man that he grabbed the wrong bucket, pointed out the bucket of water on the cliffs nearby, and pushed him to quickly grab it. But by the time the man had retrieved the bucket and come back down, it was too late. The children had burned to death. With his life's work in ashes in front of him, Morris mumbled about the tragedy, one of the saddest things in his life, second only to that day in which his bulldozing dream died forever. Even though these characters aren't as prominent in the game as Brad, Buddy, and Rando, their own stories are filled with tragedy and heartache, just like the main characters of the series, really giving weight to them and giving life to the land of Olathe, whose brutality wasn't limited to just those in the limelight of the main story. But that pretty much wraps things up here. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to share. I'd be happy to hear from you. But that's it, so thank you for watching and see you later.